All good. Beautiful. Thank you, guys. So we'll just pass the mic around. I hope everyone's been jotting down their questions. I forgot to mention at the start. I'll be throwing it to you guys, so I hope you've got them written down.
Now you should be in charge of this because you've got to give it to whoever the questions do.
Thank you. Well, I was hoping to open with you. No, but that's okay. I'll actually throw to Melissa, if I can prompt to you. I was just wondering, what is one of the most significant challenges you've faced through your career to where you are today? Along with the parental responsibilities and things you discussed earlier.
I think one of the significant challenges with, throughout my career is not having the courage to be able to say, this is what I can give you. And so one of the things when I started at Rodan Fields, I was very clear in the interview that I was a mum. I had 4 children, I did divulge that. And I remember the founder going, what were you thinking? And so one of the things I said to them, and I think it comes from being older and knowing what I can bring to the table. I said, this is what I can do with launching the business in Australia. This is, what I think I can achieve revenue. But this is what I need from you. And so I was very clear on I will travel, but I will travel no more than 5 nights per month. Because when I add that up, that's about 3 months a year that I'm away from my children. And so if you ask me to do more, I'm going to have a problem with that. And I probably won't be the right person to run your business. So I think it's, for people coming up, it's know what you bring to the table, be confident in that, say this is what I can deliver to you, because I think that throughout my career, I've always felt guilty. And I feel guilty that, I'm leaving my kids, but I don't stand up because I don't want to upset my boss. And it's all of that. And so that's what I'd say is I think that if I could rewind, 14 years, my eldest is almost 14, I would say that you should just stand up for yourself, because at the end of the day, someone else can do that business trip. And there are some things that are non-negotiable. And so I'm very clear on what's non-negotiable. Like if I have to go to present to the board about the Australian business, pretty much I'm probably the best person to do that. But if there's something else, I want my team to be empowered. They can go and actually host something on my behalf. So I would say that too is, enroll really great people around you. I now employ, an incredible team. They're all incredibly talented, more so than I am. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, never be afraid to say that I can't do it. Would one of you mind covering for me? So that's what makes a good team. So again, just have courage and stand up.
Beautiful, beautiful. And setting boundaries at the beginning when you're starting your career with this that company.
Correct.
Putting in place what you can do, what you can't, or what you've got movement on.
Correct. And just not feeling guilty, just saying this is what I can offer to you, this is how many days I can travel. For me, actually, one of the things, particularly even in my old role, is I start super early. So I want to get to the office generally. There's a couple of us, we want to get here at 7 a.m. I'm very disciplined. My team know 5 to 4, I want to get out there before the call centre that seems to take up our entire rest of our floor gets in that down lift. And I want to be down in that basement. And so it's like 5 to 4, bye, I'm out of here. And so that's what I say is I don't feel guilty because I have to go home and I have to be a mum now. That's my, my other role. So again, just be very clear on expectations and just try not to feel bad.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think we're seeing more with technology, the flexible working environments. I know, Gill, you're a big thing on that with flexibility in the workplace and knowing your hours. How do you think other companies can employ that, or what is your advice for that kind of situation with women and children? And
I'm not sure why you're asking me that one.
Well,
I think I've got better at it, and I think we've all had to we've had to change as we've gone along. And I remember an incident with a previous boss where there was no flexibility, and it was you've got to be here 9 to 5, and that wasn't conducive to mums with children. I had 2 young children at the time. So I think now it's about how we measure performance. There was always the dreaded performance review, and you sit down once a year. I've never understood that in my entire career. Why don't you just tell people as you go along what's going on rather than once a year? But it's about accountabilities, and if people have got outcomes, and if they can get it done quicker or in a different way, then allow them to do that. They don't have to be in that office unless that's part of their role. Poor Chelsea's role is to open up in the morning. But it's about being flexible because it's about outcomes and getting the job done, not being in an office. Because you know what? They can be sat in an office at a desk and not getting the job done. So it doesn't really matter where they are. But allowing them that flexibility, I think, means they're going to be better at their jobs. And certainly for me, it hasn't happened at Cogra because we have an office with no showers. But I know Fiona will attest to this. At Usana, I started the running club lunchtimes because we had showers, and it's still going, fortunately, like 15 years on. That's not why we're moving offices. Well, maybe it is. But I'm a great believer. I work much better in the afternoon if I've been out for a run and got some fresh air. So in fact, we have a meeting tomorrow, which is a walk and lunch meeting. So yeah, I'm trying to practice what I preach.
Exactly. Oh, good. Thank you, Gill. Does anyone have a point on that with flexibility in their workplace?
Do you have a question from the audience? Great, Kylie.
Oh, beautiful.
I'm not loud enough without a microphone. Probably the loudest person here. That's Kylie. I work for Party Light. How do you change old habits with that? Because with flexibility, there are people that have potentially been in a business for a long time. So, for instance, I've come from lots of different businesses and lots of different flexible hours. Example, at Lint, like you do a 39-hour week, but you could finish on Friday at 1 or 3 whenever you've done your work, as long as you were accountable, responsible, put the onus back on them. So how do you make that mind shift within the company to kind of adapt to new flexible working arrangements?
Anybody like to answer that?
I'll take that.
Christine, right.
So when I took over Amway, it was a very traditional sort of business model. Most people worked 8:30 to 5. We had flexible hours, but we didn't really promote it. And some departments were flat out told you can't do it. And one of the things I disliked is I was getting emails at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night from my team. And I just called them out on it. I said, guys, I leave the office and you will rarely get a response from me after hours unless you need me to respond. And I really suggest that you stop sending emails at 11 o'clock because your team members then feel obligated to respond to those emails. And it took a while, and I think, to Melissa's point, I'm very good at self-care. So if I feel I've had a hard week and I'm really struggling to be in the office, I will leave. And I will leave at 4 o'clock, and I will shut my door so everyone knows I've left, and I will walk through the office saying goodbye to people as I leave. So being really overt about the fact that I'm not embarrassed to be leaving at 4 o'clock. I canceled a business trip last Saturday because I was feeling unwell, and I probably should have gone. I was scheduled to speak on stage. And I just thought I can't do it. I'm run down, I'm tired, I'm getting sick. I just can't get on a plane and fly to Melbourne. And it took a while for me to stop feeling guilty about doing that. And then it came down to, I can only do my job well if I'm feeling well. But really, it was really quite interesting to watch the mindset change because we still had guys in our office who sent the email at 6 a.m. when they arrived. Who has the staff that does that? Everyone does, right? I'm here, I'm sending you an email. And then they send you an email at 6 o'clock at night when they leave, just so you know. And it's that kind of, I think, old school thinking that I'm trying to break down and say, as Gill said, you do your work when you're available to do your work and not 9 to 5.
Any other questions in the audience?
Sorry, I've got one, and I think a couple of you have touched on it. Gill, you mentioned about women not stepping up to take positions or being available to do things, yet everybody has talked about responsibilities of family and juggling those competing needs. So what needs to change to allow women to be able to step up and have that space to be able to do that with all their other responsibilities?
Mrs. Roche?
Well, look, I think you've got to have the confidence, basically, to know that you can put yourself forward. And I have to say to you that, I've never really lacked the confidence to put myself forward into anything. And when I think about some of the things I've been invited to do, for instance, serve on the board of air services. And I thought, yep, I know a lot about airports. I know about getting there and the hassle and bustle. I know about buying a ticket and getting on board. But what do I know about, bringing planes in and out of Mascot Airport and around the country? But I decided, that I would do it and I would learn. And I did make some very helpful suggestions that I think made life easier for the people living in the suburbs around the airport, that none of the boys would make because they were too politically influenced. Some appointed by Labor ministers, some appointed by Conservative ministers. Somebody who's never been attached to any particular political party you know, and the girls can sort of ask the dopey questions, you know, but the boys won't ask, so that you bring out, you know, really what the issues are, and you can make a concrete suggestion as to how it should be done. One of the things I made an absolute must in my career when I went into a number of other things, and I won't go through, you know, I've been involved in a lot of things, a lot of diverse things. One of them particularly representing Australia in APEC under 2 Prime Ministers, under Paul Keating and John Howard. And of course that's, you know, a forum of top executives from 22 countries. One of the things that I made a point of, I would never open my mouth to offer a comment on anything unless I was asked a direct question in my first and possibly even second meeting, until I had everybody's measure around the room, understood where they're all coming from, understand the power plays, and understand who the real decision makers are, and not necessarily always the chairperson, and most often a man. And I would look him directly in the eye if I had a thought that I wanted everybody to pick up on, and I would say, as you would know better than I. And of course the last thing you would do is admit that you didn't know better than I. And so none of the boys would put down the idea, because I've heard so many women complain that they'll make a comment at a board meeting and it'll be just flipped aside. Half an hour later, some guy or boy around the other side will make the same. They say, top idea, wonderful. You know, so you've got to learn to play the game, girls. You know, that's, and I think, you know, once you do know how to play the game, and basically make sure, you know, you get in line with the power players and decision makers. You see, the thing that I always considered was very important. It doesn't really matter who gets the credit, particularly if you're part of a board. It doesn't really matter who actually makes the suggestion to achieve the outcome, because when it's announced, well, the board has decided. So you're working as part of a team. So it's a matter of how you best get the idea into play and make sure that it is accepted by all the players. So you do it by understanding where the strengths are, and pick your time, your person and your place. One of the other things I will say also, and I've said this so often to corporate women, I was one of the founders of Chief Executive Women, CEW, with a group of about, I think there were 14, 16 of us in those early days, 30 years ago. And I would always say to these girls who were striving to be part of a corporate team and part of being on boards, always make sure that you are appropriate and that you look appropriate. You don't go to the office looking as though you're dressed to go to a disco. And basically, you know, if you're there for a serious discussion, make sure that the emphasis and the focus is in the contribution, the intellectual contribution you are to make. Not the fact that you have the most lustrous hair in the room, or, you know, basically you want to direct the attention to your boobs or your thighs. You know, it's basically being appropriate, and in every occasion. And those of you who want to step up to senior management positions, make sure you look the part. It's important. You know, you only ever have one opportunity to make a first impression. So think about it.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.
Sharon, to take your question on a slightly different route, talk about how, I think your question was, how do you have it all? If you're going to step up but also be a family and remember your own health. And I've just come from a Women in Hearts ambassador lunch, which I'll talk about in a bit, about balance. I think the way I've done it is, one, I have an incredible husband partner who's, you know, an equal to me and does step up. But it's outsourcing. It's outsourcing. You get somebody to clean your house, you know. When I was building my direct selling business, 2 young children, Chad and I were both working full time. We had a cleaner, we had a housekeeper. Like, nobody had housekeepers in our village, 3 days a week. So the kids would ring the housekeeper, Nancy, who's still in touch with 30 years on, and say, where's my soccer kit? Because I didn't know. And the guilt is like, oh my God, I kept hearing my mother, you should know it. You should be cleaning that soccer kit. But As Mrs. Roche said, it didn't matter. Recently, I mean, outsourcing. Jen taught me Airtasker. Oh my God, my life would not be complete without Airtasker. I've just air-tasked 2 jobs last week because I'm going on vacation Friday morning and I can't get them done. So I've air-tasked them. HelloFresh is my saviour because my husband is retired, I work long hours, he's the cook now, but he can't cook. Paul, you dare tell him I can't. But I love food, I like good food. And I was so sick of going home on a Monday night and it's spaghetti bolognese tonight and it's pasta on a Tuesday. So HelloFresh is amazing because he gets the food, he gets the recipes, and he just has to put the 2 together. So I think you can have it all in measure and you just got to balance it and not feel guilty. I mean, when I went on a trip years ago, the kids were tiny, they would tell you this story. He had to take a week off work to look after them when I worked full time. I didn't get that. And he missed picking them up from playgroup, forgot the time. They still to this day bring it up at family dinner. Do you remember, Dad, the day? And they're 30 and 28. Do you remember when you didn't pick us up from playgroup? So it's about having outsourcing. And you can outsource anything, like anything. I got so guilty I bought wool the other week, a year ago, to knit my daughter a pair of gloves because she lived in Melbourne. The wool sat there for a year. Remember this story, Jen? Outsourced it, $20, woman on the manly bus. She knitted them for me, gave them back a week later. I still haven't told Shelby, but that's okay. She thinks I did it. So, outsourcing.
I think what I want to add to that, though, is, not to disregard these 2 comments. I think these 2 responded in terms of what women need to do. And I actually think there's a lot that corporates need to do. I think it's still frowned upon to leave early unless you have a good reason. Right? It's still frowned upon to be part-time. It's considered less of a job. So I think as leaders of organizations, we really need to practice what our policies say, and that if someone is working part-time, we're treating them in an equivalent manner to someone who's full-time, not just, oh, that's Jenny, she's only in 3 days a week. So to consider people who are working part-time for promotions, to think about how you can structure the roles in your company, that they can be done with job share, or that they're supportive to a part-time role, even though it might be a full-time role. So I think there's still a lot of onus on companies to create positions and work environments that really support women having it all.
Tammi, do you want to add to that?
Yeah.
You've got... Okay, I've got both mics.
The thing that I'd love to say is that because I do coach a lot of executives, and now that I coach more executive women, is to your point about looking the part, is what I see so often is women who go to the nth degree to go hyper masculine, and every interaction they have is coming from quite the more so the aggressive place, rather than using some of the gifts that they really truly have inside them. And so I think it's something to consider about looking at both ends of the spectrum to say, how can I look the part and feel confident in my own skin to walk into every interaction that I need to have today? And also, how can I feel like me? Because I know that when I was in the corporate world and, I trot in there in my heels and in my jacket, and it was always kind of putting on a bit of a show, like, I'm going to prove I know what I'm talking about by doing this. And then it was interesting that when I relaxed into my own self and didn't apologise or denigrate any of the things that are important to me in my personal life, that I then started to really bloom as a businesswoman. I don't have to put down the spiritual side of my business and the meditation and the mindfulness aspect I have, because I'm really proud of that. And I can pull on both of those and be feminine and masculine and be empowered without having to really go down that hyper masculine route.
It doesn't work. It really doesn't work, women trying to behave like the guys, it really doesn't work. You're so right. You use the feminine wiles that we have, and we can be very persuasive. We really can. You've got to learn to use those things. Now, I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, so there are 3 boys and 3 girls in our family. And, to this day, some of the little things that are still important in life, you don't emasculate the men. You know, women, I think in some respects, women are going a bit too far. And, you know, we've got to protect our men. One of the things that I was always conscious of was my darling husband. And, you know, very few men he was born in 1935. I mean, he always loved to tell everybody he married an older woman. and my rejoinder to that was he needed the wisdom then, and he still does. However, he would never go anywhere with me, you know, just as a partner. And particularly when I would do international travel, you know, serving for Australia with APEC, there were a lot of things that he should have been with me, would never go. But basically, when I had invitations to Women in Australia addressed to Imelda Roche and partner, Donna would send them back and say, would you please readdress that to Mr. and Mrs. Bill Roche? You know, it's just a simple courtesy. That's who I am. I married Bill Roche. And I'm Mrs. Bill Roche. I might be Imelda. But I think we basically need to be able to just take care of those sensitivities within our community and understand that, you know, men and women will never be equal. And I'd say equal. Heaven help us if we ever are, because we'd all be just one, an amoeba. You know, we are different. So, you know, we make the most of our differences, but we have the same level of respect. So we have to make sure that we present ourselves in such a way that we expect that respect. And I took on board what you were saying about it's disrespectful to call, you know, a girl, but look, in this community, it's not. It's really not. You know, we're all girls. And I think, you know, in each of these very handsome men here, in every one of them, there's still a little boy. You know, so basically, you know, we have to recognise those things and make the most of them.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience?
Come on, there must be some more questions.
I just wanted to ask if any of you have ever invested in a mentor or a coach in any of your careers, and what was the positive?
So I am a coach. So I adore coaching and mentoring. And I think one of the things that has been most helpful in my personal career is having incredible female kick-ass mentors who are just so powerful and empowered in their own bodies and in their own businesses and careers, that because they're so empowered and they were able to see something in me that maybe I wasn't entirely sure of yet, that really pushed me over the brink to be able to make those scarier decisions. So I think if you're looking to grow career-wise into a really specific thing, I think mentoring is fabulous, because you find somebody who's been there and you pick their brains and you ask them what to do. If you're not entirely sure which direction you want to go down, coaching is probably your best bet, because they can unfurl all of the layers to be able to say, well, what is the thing that lights you up? What makes you feel so empowered? You know, what can you do for hours and hours and you don't even notice the time or remember to drink water? You know, and really pull back those layers. And in the women that I've worked with who are at the executive level, they're the ones that need coaches and mentors more than anybody else, because a lot of them have become quite akin or used to putting on quite a mask, and they've got people to lead, and it's a tricky path, that discernment of what you share, what vulnerabilities you keep to yourself and what you show. So yes.
Jill, do you have a point for that?
Oh, sure. And I was just going to add about mentoring. I think it's incredible, and it's probably one of the things that throughout my career helped me actually climb the corporate ladder. And I actually always go for a mentor who's a man and has got skills that I don't have, because I just like when I employ people, I don't need all males, because that'd be great. We'd be all up here with our vision, and but none of us would actually be implementing anything. And so I always try to go. So for instance, when I first became a general manager, my specialty is food technology, but then I studied marketing. And so when I became a general manager, I wasn't great when it came to finance. I could read a balance of, profit and loss sheet, but I wanted to understand the numbers. And so I reached out to the CFO of the company I worked with, and I just said to them, can you mentor me? Can you make me better at this and understand it? And it's about having that vulnerability. And I'm the first person who asks ridiculous questions, because there's often a lot of other people who just don't have the courage to ask it. And so, I had someone who mentored me, and every, week she would ring me religiously And she'd go, what questions do you have now? And I'd be like, well, I'm looking at the balance sheet and I'm looking at our write-off costs. And so it's stuff like that of, you know, for me, mentoring was, you know, I'm a woman and I have a whole life ahead of, you know, like a whole full life. But I want people who can actually teach me to maybe think a little differently. So it was a CFO, and then a weakness for me, a skill shortage, was actually, you know, supply chain. So, you know, at Rodan Fields, one of the things here, I want to get better at that because that hurts my business if I have to write off a lot of money. And so I reached out to, again, the head of supply chain and said, could you actually coach and mentor me? So every month I'm going to put a calendar invite on there. Can you? And it's been incredible and actually transformational. So I would say have the courage to reach out to someone either outside your organisation or inside your organisation. And I think that's what the DSA is great about, is, you know, have a connection with someone and say, I'd love it if you'd mentor me, because my career has been great because I've had people who just wanted to give me this amazing information. So I think it's, yeah, best thing you can do.
Beautiful. Jill, did you have a point to
No,
that?
I totally agree. I've taken jobs because of people. I mean, I took the job at USANA because I'd seen Bill Duncan present and I wanted to work for him. And I think you've got to surround yourself. And I think Mel makes a really good point. It's not about people who can give you what you know you need. It's what people can give you what you don't know you need. And, you know, you've got to ask some tough questions. Absolutely.
Perfect.
There was a question at the back, I think.
I actually had a question for our coach here. It's Tammi, isn't it? Anybody that works with the field, we're working with them, developing, coaching them all the time, and I feel such a sense of responsibility for their own development as well, because often they've never done anything like this, and they're hitting a lot of self-esteem barriers as they go along. I just wanted to get your thoughts, because I love what you shared before about the imposter syndrome, about resilience. And when you have the knocks, just what would your thoughts be in how to coach somebody through that?
Yeah, this is really common, regardless of what industry you're in, for sure. And the kind of buzzword around resilience at the moment is mental toughness and being able to get your skin in the game, and if you have that knockback, to still be okay. If you're taking on the coaching for staff members, consultants, leaders in your business, and that's part of your role, that is a huge responsibility. And something that I would really recommend is that you have the conversation with that person you're coaching up front to say, look, I'm still new at this, if you are, or I want to make sure that together you and I get the best possible outcome for your career or for your sales funnel or for whatever it is. What do you need from me? And because I think what a lot of people do when they attempt to coach people is give them advice, and advice is what comes from our own experience, and that's what a mentor does. When we're coaching, we're actually saying, what do you need? You've actually got the answers yourself, and you're constantly just throwing questions back at them. If they say, oh, I feel like I'm drowning when it comes to party plans, for example, I don't have the confidence. Okay, well, what do you think you need to boost up that confidence? And just continuously putting questions back at them. If it gets to a point where they're at risk of drowning, give them some advice. But the idea is that you want to just keep asking them the questions. They know the answers deep down somewhere, and if they don't, say, what question do you need to ask to get that answer for yourself? You know, it's sort of the Chelsea Google thing. As long as you come up with the best possible question, or they come up with it for themselves, they're going to get a really chunky, solid answer.
I'd like to add something to this, because if you're doing group coaching, one-on-one mentoring, that's, you know, we've had some input on that. But if you've got a group of people and you're talking about party plan, where you're asking people to talk to a group of people, you'll have women say, oh, I can't do that. You know, I've never been able to stand up and speak in front of people. I'd be too shy. So I used to ask them the question, do you ever feel shy if you have a group of mothers at Mothers Club and you're talking about your children? And the answer is no. No, of course they don't. So basically, the reason why you don't is because you have confidence, you know everything about those children, and you don't have to worry about what you're going to say because you have the knowledge. So if you're presenting products, make sure you need to know everything you want to say and do about that product. Don't drown them with information, because they really want to know what the product's going to do for them. But basically, they've got to make sure they know and understand and believe in what it is they're offering, And then they have confidence. The other big thing that I would always recommend when people were doing their first joint presentation to 6 or 8 or 10 people, find the most interested pair of eyes in the room, and there's always one that you can focus. Yep. So you've got a pair of eyes. You talk to that one pair of eyes, and then you basically stray over to the next pair of eyes, and then you start to radiate around. But basically start with one. And the other big tip is, don't worry about what people are going to think of you. Put yourself out of the picture. What you're focusing on is the knowledge that you want to impart. Why the product I'm presenting to you is going to really benefit you. That's what I want to tell you. And that's what I'm going to concentrate on, and I'm going to forget about what the rest of you think of me. So I'll find that pair of eyes, I'll concentrate on the message, and then I'll start to roam around, and that's how you gain that confidence.
Beautiful. Oh, Paul, actually. I thought we'd ask you a little question. You'll come with a mic. So from today,
You can mix yourself, yes.
what do you believe is the most important point men can take away from the discussion today?
Growing up, starting in the 60s and into the 70s, one of the things I didn't like about the feminist movement when it first started and I first heard about it is it felt antagonistic and competitive, and I don't see it that way. So what I'm loving about what I'm hearing here is wanting men to be part of the conversation, because there are men who want to be part of the conversation. And I always felt like I wasn't allowed to be part of the conversation back in the 70s and the early 80s. Like my opinion didn't matter, and I kind of felt bad about that. So I love being engaged by women in particular who want to know what my point of view is. I may not be the average male or the average Australian male, being American, but I have a male point of view that I like it when it wants to be heard and it's welcomed by a room full of women like we have here today. So I've been lucky to work for very strong female mentors and executive directors and GMs, and I've had strong female leads throughout my whole life, whether it's been my mom or relationships, and I've always felt better because of that. So I can't imagine a world where we don't have that togetherness, that inclusion. So if we can get that message to keep going, I think we're going to get more and more people who are then advocates, as opposed to the defensiveness that you sometimes can get, particularly from men. They feel threatened sometimes.
Thank you, Paul. Did anyone have a point to that about including men in the discussion?
A quick note, there's a great t-shirt you can buy at the moment for men, and it says, "This is what a feminist looks like." I love it. I ordered one yesterday.
Thank you.
Paul, I think you make a very good point, because I think a lot of the drive that's going on at the moment with the feminist movement is being, there's a difference between being assertive and aggressive. Women are allowed to be assertive, and we need to be most of the time, but women are frowned upon if they become aggressive. Men can become aggressive, but I think the feminist movement is becoming aggressive, and I think it is making, as Paul has said, men feel defensive. They're not the enemy, and we have to think, girls, that really society and society norms have developed over centuries. And if you think about the attitudes of your husbands or your boyfriends or your fathers, think about their mothers and their grandmothers and their great-grandmothers and their great-great. We've all been part of society since the beginning of time, and if we want to change it, it is by gentle evolution. It isn't really by making men feel as though we consider that they are the enemy and we've just got to, punch our way up the chain. Use your feminine wiles, for goodness sake, girls, and be resilient. What we're doing, I think the feminist movement is making women feel as though they're all victims and they're not resilient. We've got to gain that resilience and take charge. Like I say to my darling husband, he needed the wisdom then and he still does.
Christine.
Oh, I just wanted to share a funny story, and ironically, it's a very good follow to what Imelda just said. I just came back from a family holiday, so we had my mother, my brother, his 3 kids, and me and my husband. And I grew up in a very traditional household. So my mom worked, but she also did the laundry and did the ironing and cooked and cleaned and did all of that. And as the daughter, I was expected to cook and clean and iron my dad's shirts and all of that. And then I hit university and became kind of a raging feminist, which has toned down over the years. So Paul wouldn't have liked me back then. But it was really quite interesting because, you know, we've just had all this Me Too stuff and all these stories come out. And yet there I was sitting in this villa in Italy. And I vividly remember my mom turned to me and she said, "Oh, let me help you get the dishes or get the laundry or something." And I just very nonchalantly said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Gab will do it." And then I just kind of had this moment that, wow, like how surreal is it for my mom, kind of raising her kids a certain way, treating her husband a certain way, and then to spend a week with both of her kids and their partners, and my brother's doing laundry, and his wife is sitting drinking wine, and I'm directing my husband to clean the table. And I thought, no, I mean, honestly, I just thought, wow, so there is progress. I mean, that's in one generation, just a complete shift in terms of, you know, kind of what's the norm. Just thought I'd share that.
Any more questions? Oh, we have. Great.
Oh.
Let me see if I can overcome my imposter syndrome. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Gonçalo from Swarovski. I'm sales manager for the corporate business and a proud supply member of DSA. And the reason I'm here is to learn, regardless of it's from women, men, we are all humans, right? And I want to thank you all for sharing these experiences. I've learned a lot, and one of the things is that at Swarovski we believe in empowering women, not only because 73 or 75% of our workforce are women, although only 27% are on senior management. And it's been growing. But we also believe because our consumers are also women, and they have a very, very important role on the development of our own path. My question to you is, in taking on that generation, at Swarovski we believe that the future is equal, regardless of gender, race, belief. Do you think that these new generations believe that we are closer to that stage?
I think some of the girls that are younger than me should answer that.
Well, I'll start. Sorry, Jill. Thank you.
I would have said yes before I got this job. I would have said that gender's not an issue, it's not part of the conversation, you know, let's just all move on and talk about something else. But as I said, when I was put in the role, it was really amazing to me how much gender was a part of the conversation and how much it still is. I mean, I had a meeting with an older gentleman and a distributor, and he immediately assumed that the older gentleman was the general manager and not me. And I just kind of think it's funny. I get a kick out of it because then when you introduce themselves, they're just like, oh, you're female and young, and it's quite interesting. So I think it's different. Again, I don't think girls today are brought up, say, in the environment I was, whereas very clearly, you know, there were male jobs and there were female jobs. My mom, for example, would never hang a picture. And as I got older, I started to say, well, Mom, the hammer's right there. And she's like, that's your father's job. And I'm just like, really? But you're bitching about him not doing it. Maybe you should just pick up the hammer and do it yourself. So I think that has changed, but I still do think women are limited a lot by their self-belief. We heard a lot about that today. I think a lot about how corporations in particular are structured to still support traditional models, not necessarily as flexible as women, particularly women with children, need it to be. And I think there's an element of, I hate to say it, misogyny running through society. And I think until we get past that, I think it's going to be tough. And that's probably pretty depressing. But I really, what really bothers me is when you go on the internet and you read the comments from the trolls, and I know everyone can say, oh, they're just trolls, they're looking for a reaction, but you look at the level of malice and hatred and really sort of personal attacks against women, and that really makes me sad just for society in general. So.
I think there is a change. It's obviously changed in the time I've been in the workforce, but I think the change is coming quicker, and that's what I like, the speed of change. I look at my daughter who's 30, a pretty empowered, and back to direct selling a little bit. She's been brought up a direct seller. She's never done it herself, but she's been brought up in a direct selling home, and she's learned that women can be empowered and do anything, and she is doing anything. And telling her brother that too, and he's seen that. So as they come through, our family dinner's going to be quite interesting, because the two of them are very opposing views. But she will tell you that it is changing, that in her generation, she's standing up for herself, she's stepping forward. And I think that's another benefit that maybe you just don't see yet, but with the consultants you're helping, it's their children as well, that's going to have a massive impact. When I turn around and my kids throw back at me the direct selling advice I've been giving them for 25 years, I'm a bit hurt, but it's going on. So I think it is changing, and the more we can keep that change and the speed of change and move it along, I think it will change. I think it may be another few years.
If I can make a comment on the domestic front, I have 2 sons and 2 daughters. So I have 2 daughter-in-laws and 2 son-in-laws, and I notice a kind of equal distribution domestically of roles within those households. I still have a very traditional role. Bill knows how to switch on the kettle to boil the water, and he knows how to stand at a barbecue and let everybody know, I need that, and so he has the runners bringing everything to him, and that's because I allowed that to happen all the years, that we've been married. But I notice my daughters and daughters-in-law they share the roles. The boys, step up, and they're doing, their fair share, and I'm very impressed. I think I've got 4 really, really good fathers, in my family.
I think.
Coming from potentially a different generation, I am very hopeful about the changes that are occurring. And if I look at the conversations of people in my generation, they're very different. If I go to a barbecue and there is 20 couples there, you have no idea who's going to be standing at the barbecue. Most of the time, the guys are doing the washing up and we're having a wine. It's really different now. But one thing that I really want to add to that is the added stress that creates for us, because when there is a society where there is a really clear role, women in the kitchen, men at work, people know, well, I wake up, this is what I do. But now that there is, thankfully, greater choice for everyone, we also have to deal with the paradox of choice, which is when there are so many options that we can kind of freeze. So we can be an engineer, an astronaut, a general manager, a stay-at-home mum. We can be anything that we want. And acknowledging that there is a bit of a tug and a bit of a struggle in all of those additional decisions that we now have to make is really important. So I'm grateful that it's there, and I'm wearing the feminist t-shirts most days. However, we really need to acknowledge that that's an extra stressor that we now need to deal with.
And how do we deal with it?
By reducing the options, so by grouping them. So if we have, let's say, 100 options of what we can do with our careers, for example, group them into 5 and then say, okay, well, do I want to be in a sales-based role? Do I want to be in a management-based role? Do I want to be in a totally people-based role? Okay, great, it's people-based. Cool, now that I'm in there, I'm going to make a choice out of those. So it's reducing your options.
Excellent. Any more questions? Otherwise, I think we're going to round up. Quick, Jason, do you have any more questions?
No, that's all from me. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being a part of today's conversation. It's been amazing to hear from you all.
And I think we all want to say thank you to our panel. So if I can ask you to give a warm round of applause for Chelsea and our panel. Thank you so much.